Okay, so my name's Jocelyn from Massachusetts, and I am here to talk a little bit about what is going on with DCF and what I know in regards to them, because I definitely wish that I knew even half of what I know now about how to deal with things and how to handle yourself when they start bringing certain things up and they try to bully you into giving information. So I'm going to go over my story, what happened with me, and not only that, but the solutions to it. Um, okay, well, so I really don't usually announce this, but I am a heroin addict. I've been clean for 2.5 years, and that is because I had a relapse 2.5 years ago. It was one relapse, but I was clean for about a year before then, so the relapse threw me off. But either way, and I'd just like to say from the beginning, I am accountable for my part in everything, but I will only be crucified by DCF and have them be wrongfully involved for so long. Anyways, um, I had entered an IHR program with my son. It's a woman and children inpatient residential program. This was in 2013. Now, during my stay there, about 4 to 5 months in, I relapsed during a weekend while my son was away with his father for the weekend. During that time, I relapsed. My son was returned back to me while I was not relapsed. About a week later, I came forward and I was honest about my relapse because I thought it defeated the whole purpose of entering treatment to get clean in the first place. I went there to get clean. I didn't get there to go sneak doing drugs. So I went forward for help because I didn't know what else to do. What I didn't know would happen was obviously this initiated an emergency response. They came out, assessed it, let Adrian stay with me overnight. They said, "You're just going to go see your worker tomorrow. You're going to discuss a new place to live that's safe." Yada, yada, yada. I went in, I did just that. The worker, obviously, she knew my history in terms of being placed in foster care myself. As a small child, I was placed into the system, and she knew it was a horrible experience, and it would be my absolute worst fear for my son to ever go there. And she used that against me. She coerced me into signing custody of my son to my mother. She couldn't do this through any sort of a kinship placement because my mom obviously had a history with DCF. So she said, "You're going to go into probate court tomorrow, and you're going to agree to do this, or else we're going to go pick up your son right now. We're going to pick him up from daycare. We're going to take him right to foster care." And she literally told me, "You're not even going to get to say bye to him." So, of course, I agreed. So, the next day, I did just what she had said in probate court. I went forward. I had DCF involved for about a year following. They were there the whole time while I went through 6 months of treatment on my own in an inpatient facility where my son was able to sleep over every Friday afternoon until Sunday night. Every weekend, I had him. And then eventually, after 6 months there, I had completed some other outpatient programs on top of that. I did everything they wanted me to do. I did more than what they wanted me to do. I jumped through their hoops. And this was also under the promise that once I was done with the service plan, I would get custody of my son back. This was just a deal. I never thought to question, I thought do what they want you to do, and it's going to be okay. So I did what they wanted me to do. I was living with my mother for months, and my mom was refusing to give back guardianship. So by this time I had sent a letter, the same letter, out to quite a few different places that sparked a response. And the supervisor of my caseworker actually called me, and she pretty much told me off. She said, "Why did you do that?" And it turned into something where she had said she was sorry my case had slipped through the cracks, and she always hates to see it when this happens, where the system doesn't really work in your favor. So she and the caseworker came out to my mother's house. They defended me. Not basically, they did. They said, you made a deal and you should probably honor that. But in any event, we have no cause for concern or neglect in terms of Jocelyn. At this time, I had completely taken over as, the active mother role, which I had before. Not to mention my drug addiction, my heroin addiction, it didn't exceed 2 months. I went right into treatment. It wasn't because DCF told me to. This is something I did on my own, and through that, they got involved. So they said that they needed to close and stop providing services. I would still argue that at that time, I actually could have used the services because this was a difficult situation. I said, could I even get a letter from you for probate court for when I go in? And when I get in front of the judge, I'm not expecting the judge to just say, oh, well, here's this heroin addict here telling me she's clean, telling me she has all clean drug tests, and that DCF says they're parent of the year. No, I don't expect that, and I don't think any judge would really take someone's word like mine. And that's why I know how important it is to have documentation and paperwork backing up what you say. So, needless to say, I had all my drug tests in this binder. I had everything in there, everything documented, all my appointments, completions and certificates to different substance abuse programs that I completed, letters from counselors, letters from my son's school. Went in there. My son's father and my mom showed up to the hearing for my petition for removal of guardianship. They both trashed me. They said horrible things, but I knew this was coming, so that's why I had all the documents there. Obviously, DCF had pulled out, and they said, in our opinion, Amy, which is my mother's name, it's time for you to give up the guardianship. And my mom said, no, she trashed me, but they continued to stick up for me. Anyway, so I went in there and that happened. My mother, by the time I went to the next court case in probate to remove guardianship and return custody to myself, my son was already living with me outside of my mother, the guardian's house. The judge was made aware of this. So, yeah, he was living with me. He had already started kindergarten. In Northbridge, I live in Whitingsville, Northbridge Elementary School. So, September 4th, I went back for that case, and my mother didn't even show up. That was who guardian is. And Alex was there. He, of course, trashed me again to the judge. So the judge wasn't willing to see any of my evidence, all my drug tests. And I'm talking about, I really knew what was coming. So I was proactive in making sure that I was requesting and getting called in for weekly random drug tests for quite some time. So September 4th, 2016, at the end of the trial, the judge says she's going to take her decision under advisement and that she would send her answer by mail. Yeah, she never sent any answer by mail. What she did send was DCF. DCF, and keep in mind that DCF are the ones who told me to pursue custody back of my son. They closed the case. They said, you're doing great, no cause for abuse or neglect. And at that point, I had backed off of DCF because I thought, you know what, hey, they're being accountable. They're saying sorry. They're recognizing that they did something wrong. But then what happened next? It was, and the list goes on. So this is what the judge issued. This is called a sua sponte, which is basically when a judge decides that they are going to go off on their own and kind of make their own little thing kind of going on over there. So let's see. Right here, it says a sua sponte order for the transfer of care and custody to the Department of Children and Families. Like, are you fucking crazy? It says that, so this was September 4th. Obviously, she had sent this over on a Friday night, like right before the offices would be closing, so no one could even contact the judge to say what is going on. So that was September 4th. She scheduled a further hearing to follow up on this decision for October 1st. And I meant to say 2015 for all of these, I'm sorry. Anyways, she listed a lawyer for my son as the child's attorney. This person was like, I removed myself from that list like a long time ago. I never received any notice saying I'm the lawyer. Because I called to follow up, obviously, to talk to my son's lawyer. Because a son's lawyer should be interested in my son's best interests, as should DCF, as should, you would think, a family court, but whatever. So they also had said that DCF had made every effort to avoid removing my son. The judge had checked this off. It says right here, further, after hearing, the court determines, after consideration of the health and safety of the child, that an X mark there, the Department of Social Services or its agents has made reasonable efforts prior to the placement of the child with the Department of Social Services to prevent or eliminate the need for removal from the child's home. Now, there was none of that. There was show up and take your kid. One of the guys who came, he knew what was happening was wrong. There were 4 DCF workers and 1 cop. The worker called the supervisor and he said, do we really have to do this? The supervisor said yes. So they removed my son. Needless to say, my son was returned back home to me in 2 weeks. So my son spent 2 weeks out of the home. Also, DCF will say that they will attempt to place your child with a family member if they can. Now, my aunt, she actually was a foster parent. She is, she has her master's degree. She's a school teacher, for God's sakes. She's a model citizen. They were giving her trouble about bringing my son to her. They wanted to put him into foster care. Like, I'm telling you this. They really did. Now, thank God this was just for 2 weeks. And make no mistake that 2 days before my son was sent back home, I had hired a new lawyer on like $5,000 retainer. They're targeting people that don't have money. They're targeting people that are of lower class because they think we're psychologically inferior. I feel like they're kind of just playing games. Like you see in the media, they're taking children because parents decided to get a second opinion on their kid. Yeah, a second opinion. I would say you should be concerned if you're not getting a second opinion when it comes to your child's health. I mean, and these sorts of things should be made at a parent's discretion. I understand in extreme cases where maybe if you see a parent saying, no, no medical care, I want to do all natural. And who am I to say what people should do with their kids? That's not my place. I'm just saying it's not up to DCF to make these decisions, especially considering that they're not qualified to make medical decisions. And I know they have a nurse teams. A team of nurses. Nurses can't make these decisions either. They don't have a doctorate's degree. And also they're not qualified to do that. Anyways, in following to the sua sponte that was ordered, I did call the Secretary of State's office to order a copy of the Department of Children and Families rules and regulations. Now, I did not know that even existed. All I knew was that apparently the U.S. Constitution doesn't apply to DCF, but they seem to have their own set of rules. So I would expect that they should at least follow those, since, they seem to be immune to everything, but they're actually not. You are able to sue them under the grounds of a violation of your civil rights. And you can find out more about that on cps.com. So I'm just going to show you this. This is one of the pages. And by the way, their rules and regulations, if you want to order a copy, just so it says on the website, call to obtain a copy. So I called the number and he's like, you gotta either send us a check or you can go online and order it. I went online and ordered it. It's just a bunch of pages like this. It's probably like, I don't know, 60, 80 pages. The point is, just pages like this. It's not like even a real book. I put it in my own binder. It came to $25.75. And I feel like it's just another money-making scheme. It's another way for them to kind of prevent the public from having it, especially being that the target area of families that is going to have 51A investigations, which are pretty much they're bogus. I mean, they're ridiculous. And you know what? If a DCF worker wants to say that I'm a negligent mother, then hey, go for it. You know what? You should really consider a career change because you're pathetic. And what you do for a living is disgusting. Children may only be committed to the custody of the department by a court after a CHINS adjudication has been entered. So, we all know what a CHINS is, which, by the way, now is called CRA, child something. I don't know. Anyways, so they're saying that for a court to order custody to DCF, it's not going to be what this judge ordered, a sua sponte, to transfer the care and custody of a 6-year-old child. That's nothing like a CHINS order. The things they do. Anyways, so they knew what they did was wrong, taking my son. They didn't have a 51A. They didn't even have any suspected abuse or neglect allegations. So my son was placed back with me. There's a lot of corruption going on right there. And you know what? I only say this because I know that there's other families out there that are dealing with crazy things, and I can't even imagine, because you know what I went through for those 2 weeks, what my son went through for those 2 weeks, and just thank God that he was placed with family. He knows my aunt. He's met her. He's been to her home. Thank God. But the terror that families go through, that they don't have somebody that was a legitimate foster parent that can, stand up to DCF and say, hey, you're going to have a hell of a hard time if you try to put this kid in foster care. My aunt had to put in a lot of calls and do a lot of work to get my son there, who's 6 years old. He's defenseless. The things happening in these foster care facilities, these homes, it's not okay. And I'm not saying every foster parent is bad, because it's just not true. But I am saying a good amount of them are. I am saying that children are definitely, even in homes where children are already being abused, they're even more likely to be abused there in the foster home. And that includes sexual abuse. I put this video up there because I think parents are scared to say anything. Basically, just like what I did, some people they may be thinking, you're an idiot. Why would you ever sign custody to somebody? I did it to avoid foster care because I was there myself. I didn't want my son to ever have to go through the things I went through. And I think a lot of parents can identify, at least, in not wanting their kids to experience bad things that they've experienced. Jeez. Anyways, so my son has been home. He's been home for 9 months. Again, he was taken from me for 2 weeks. Now, being back home, there's still been no 51A investigation. There was not one to begin with, and there hasn't been one in the time frame for DCF to be vigorously investigating me. Like I'm telling you, man. It's crazy. They've gone to my son's school. I came here to get a fresh start. Like, I wanted to start over, being that I worked so hard to get clean and to get where I am. My apartment is 3 levels. It's a duplex. It's beautiful. It has 3 bedrooms. It's probably nicer than a lot of DCF workers out there, all right? And even I'm pretty much considered poverty. I mean, I have a nice home. My savings are drained, but I will say this too, with all the court, with all the emotional distress I've been put through because of DCF, I've literally lost my job over it. Okay? The damage that they've caused, it's irreparable. Ultimately, I need to leave here and I need to go start over again. But before I can do that, and I would really like for that to be my son's next year at school, to be in a new, fresh start. I would like them to get out of here. Like, stop with the involvement. Coming once a month, showing up without calling first, sending a worker here at after 9 o'clock at night on a Friday, knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, saying DCF, DCF. Do you understand, like, what that does to my son? Let alone me. Like, just think about my son, a child. If you care anything about the best interest of a child, why would you recreate a traumatic situation? One thing is for sure, DCF is not out for the best interests of our children. They're trying to get as many kids as they can, and I know it sounds crazy. I thought it sounded crazy. I thought that there were a lot of things I had heard about DCF corruption that, I thought there might be some corruption there, but I didn't think it was the way that it is. And honestly, parents out there, anybody watching, please, like, be responsible. If you look for the information, it's there. If you do some research on it, you're going to find out that I am telling you the truth right now. They have a high caseload. It's all bogus, first of all. Of course you have high caseloads when you are you are investigating people like crazy that don't have 51A allegations. If there is no abuse or neglect, you do your little assessment and then you screen the person out. I haven't been screened out, but I will say the person does come every month. I called the area manager. She sent her out here and she must have said something to her about don't be showing up there without calling anymore. Because the worker all of a sudden started having respect in that area of calling first and not just showing up and being a complete prick and not respecting my personal dignity. Also, an agency that cares about the best interests of children, knowing that there's a direct correlation between my son peeing his pants and DCF coming. I mean, come on, guys. Come on. Like, it's not a good look. The whole federal incentives thing for adopting out a child, it's disgusting. It's disgraceful. And ultimately, I am a spiritual person. I do believe in a God, which I choose to call God. And I don't believe he's going to stand for this. I don't think you guys are going to make it that much longer. There's a lot of corruption and a lot of really bad things going on in what they do. I called to follow up with the area in Whitensville to check on my case, and the guy was like, "What case? You don't have a case." He said my case was closed. So it's like, well, what is this woman doing coming to my house all the time? We have email exchanges, and she's forcing me to do appointments when I'm saying to her, could we jointly agree that this is unnecessary? And you guys have a caseload crisis right now, so what's the deal with all this? I'm not liking it. And she, a typical DCF worker, completely deflecting. But the point is, I'm going to post up another video just about at least what most of my solution has been. Because I do believe that a lot of what's going on right now is at least in part a retaliation. Because of me sending in letters about what had happened in terms of being forced to sign custody of my son over, and them promising when I finished the service plan that I would get custody back. What happened there, that in itself was completely wrong. But to take it another step further and close the case and leave me hanging like that, but tell me, go pursue this in probate court and you can, we support you. And then when I go ahead and do just that, just what I was told to do, it doesn't really matter what they told me. I love my son. I would have done it anyways. But I went ahead and did it. And then the same people that told me to go to get my son back are taking my son away from me? Really? Come on, you guys, you should have taken 5 minutes to look into it. And I know you did. I know you did. You knew what was going on. You knew what you were doing. You were wrongfully taking a child. And I would even almost argue that it was illegal because it says right there, TCF does not take custody of a kid from a court unless it's through a chin. So, I don't know. It gives me a headache. It's like heartbreaking to know that, there's other families going through so much worse than I am. Oh my God. God help us.